They thought he was invisible. The man with the mop and the quiet eyes. The one who moved through the gleaming marbled lobby before dawn and vanished into service hallways when the city woke. When the building's glass ribs blushed with sunrise, Ethan Cole was already halfway through a floor and a half of footprints, a ghost polishing the traces of other people's lives. Most mornings, Emma Brighton was the only one who saw him. A bobbing ponytail, a pink backpack, a wave so small it could have been a secret. She liked that he waved back. She liked that he never told anyone. On the morning everything broke. Her shoes pattered a frantic metronome across the lobby. She shoved past suits and phones, and the chrome turnstiles that blinked green at her name. "They beat my mom," she said. Words arriving without breath, without commas. A straight line through terror. "She's dying." People froze, then unfroze in the predictable ways: wide eyes, fumbled calls, the soft paralysis of committees. Ethan did not freeze. He dropped the mop as if it were a rope he'd been clinging to for too long. The elevator doors bit together. He wedged a palm into the closing silver and looked down into Emma's wrecked face like a man remembering the map of a place he'd once escaped and swore he'd never go back to, then stepped inside. The lobby of Brighton Enterprises pretended not to notice the weather. Outside, March was shivering rain. Inside, a climate. Controlled spring. The atrium climbed 30 floors, a glass cathedral ribbed with steel. Scattered ficus trees repeated themselves in polished marble. Screens whispered stock prices like polite gossip. The air smelled faintly of citrus and money. Ethan Cole had been there since 4. He liked the silence at that hour. It covered him, a blanket that made him forget how sound could sometimes mean metal and heat and dust in the lungs. He cleaned the coffee spill by the reception desk, wiped down the console where 100 fingers would later tap impatiently, and paused, briefly, to look up into the atrium. From here, he could see the slanted slice of sky beginning to pale above the city's shoulders. He told himself that noticing beauty did not count as wanting anything from the day. At 7:53, Emma Brighton strode in with the precise authority of a 6-year-old who had discovered doors opened if you believed they would. Her ponytail swung like punctuation. She wore little red rain boots that squeaked when she walked, and she had drawn a yellow star on each boot with a permanent marker because the boots needed stars. The security guard, Walt, stood taller when he saw her and bowed at the waist like a tree in the wind. "Morning, Princess," Walt said. Emma wrinkled her nose. "I'm not a princess. I am a person with agency." Walt sputtered a laugh. "Where'd you learn that?" "My mom," she said proudly, and then her face softened when she spotted Ethan near the plant wall. She peeled away from her nanny, who was already on her phone, texting something that looked important, and hopped 2 steps toward him. "Hi, Mr. Ethan." Ethan smiled back, a quick dimple at one corner that could be missed if you were blinking. "Morning, Emma. What are you cleaning?" "Fingerprints." "From who?" "From yesterday's people." Emma considered this. "Do you like cleaning them?" "I like when things become clear," he said, and then felt silly for saying it out loud. "It's my mom's big meeting day," Emma confided. "She said if the men in suits say synergy again, she'll scream into a pillow." Emma imitated a silent scream, then giggled. "I painted stars on my boots." "Do you think they make me look brave?" "I think you don't need stars for that," Ethan said. Emma beamed as if he had given her an award. Her nanny, Sierra, finally noticed she had diverted and reached for her shoulder. "Come on, Em. We're late." Emma waved as she was shepherded away. "Bye." Ethan watched her disappear into the elevator bank, swallowed by brushed steel and soft chimes. He felt the small ache behind his ribs, the one that never spoke and never left and bent back to work. Clarity. Motion. A floor at a time. 27 minutes later, the world shook itself apart. It wasn't sound that warned him. It was the way the lobby changed temperature, the way people in it suddenly gathered heat and confusion, an anxious current that hummed through air-conditioned calm. The elevator doors whispered open and spat out Emma again. Except this time she wasn't a piece of punctuation. She was a fragment of a sentence that had been torn in half. She was crying. It wasn't theatrical, the way some children cry to insist the universe reorient itself around their loss. This was the small, terrible sound of something true being said out loud, a kind of honesty no adult could immediately meet. "Mr. Ethan," she gasped. "They beat my mom. She's dying. She's bleeding." Sierra stumbled after, pale, mouthing apologies to the universe. The door, her door, oh God. Walt's hand went to his radio. The receptionist lifted her phone and said automatically, "I'm calling 911. "Do it," Ethan said softly, and the way he said it made his voice the quietest thing in the lobby and also the only thing that counted. He knelt, making his eyes level with Emma's. His hand hovered for a second, then anchored gently on her shoulder. "Which floor?" 30. Emma sobbed. The glass door was broken. She was on the floor. There was blood. They were gone. I hid. "How long?" he asked. Not because he doubted, but because time changes what blood means. "I don't know." "Okay." He stood. The motion had an economy that did not belong to the man with a mop. He turned to Walt. "Call it in. Tell them unconscious female, blunt force trauma, unknown breathing status, heavy bleeding. Tell them access through South Service elevators, they're closer to the executive wing." Walt blinked. "How do you do it now?" It wasn't a question. People began to move faster because of the way he'd used those words. Ethan scooped Emma up, light as a backpack, and walked to the service corridor. The door registered his badge and did not argue. Sierra tried to follow, but she stopped when she saw Ethan's face. It wasn't frightening. It was strangely calm, as if he were shedding weight in order to run. "Stay with Walt," he said to Sierra. "Stay with him until I send someone down. And keep people away from the elevators." He handed Emma back to Sierra, then gently, brushing a rain, wet curl from her cheek. "I have to go first. I'll bring someone to you. You did the bravest thing in this building today." Emma's fingers caught his sleeve for a heartbeat. "Don't leave her." "I won't," he said, and stepped into the freight elevator as if it were a time machine. The elevator groaned like an old animal as it shouldered upward. He could feel the decades in its cables. Ethan pressed the button for 30 and then pressed the one marked "Door Close" until the metal mouth met itself with a clack. The numbers above the door began to climb, patient and inexorable. He breathed through his nose, in counts he hadn't used in years. In through 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The rhythm felt like a song his body remembered. The fluorescent light found the silver in his hair and turned it into winter. He flexed his hands once gloved themselves in muscle memory. And when the doors parted at the 30th floor, Ethan stepped into the kind of silence that makes its own wind. The executive floor wore layers. Glass on glass. Soft carpet. Swallowing footsteps. The hush money buys. When it wants to be loud without sound. The door to Madison Brighton's office hung ajar by a crooked hinge. The security panel's red eye broken into a spiderweb. There was blood on the frosted glass, arterial in its spray. And the smell of copper, and something sour, pulling like a tide. He didn't shout her name. Shouting invents panic. He moved low and fast, scanning corners habit so old it did not check with him before taking over. The room beyond the door had been designed to perform importance. A slate table long as a highway, art like price tags, a city shoved against windows until the skyline looked captive. And on the floor, Half behind the toppled leather chair near the window was Madison Brighton. She was on her side, one arm bent under her body, hair stuck to her cheek in a dark snarl. Glass glittered where it had given up being useful. There was blood under her more than he wanted to see, and more pooled near her hip where fabric darkened to black. Her blouse had torn along one seam. A still bleeding scalp laceration had painted her collar. He knelt, eyes already drawing a map. Carotid pulse? Faint, but there. Breathing? Shallow, wet at the edges. Skin? Cool at the extremities. Pupils? Reactive. Neck? No step-offs. Chest? Tenderness on the right side. Shallow respirations. Possible rib fractures. Abdomen? Guarding lower right quadrant could be internal bleeding. Could be referred pain. Pelvis? Stabilize, don't roll. Femur? No deformity. Scalp wound? Bleeding like scalp wounds do. Dramatic. Distracting. The leg of the chair nearby had a smear of blood and hair. He catalogued, triaged, pushed down the jagged thought that someone meant to leave her, not just hurt, but afraid. Madison. He said her name like a rope thrown. Her eyelids fluttered reflex only, but it was something. You're safe. Help is coming. He looked around. Cloth. Pressure. Elevate what made sense. The boardroom table wore a runner that looked like it had been woven from money. He ripped it, wrapped, and pressed firmly at the bleeding along her scalp. He took the silk scarf that had fallen from the back of a chair, tasteful corporate branding, and split it into a tourniquet for nothing in particular. Then thought better and used it as a bandage for the gash above her ear. He peeled off his jacket and rolled it into a bolstering wedge behind her back to maintain a lateral position without straining the pelvis, keeping the airway open, preventing aspiration. "Stay with me," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear. Or maybe he didn't know. Talk anyway. Calm travels. From the service corridor, he heard a distant clatter. Another elevator arriving. Good, he said to no one. He checked her mouth. A pink smear. No broken teeth to block an airway. He tilted her head slightly, opened the airway, listened again. Wet. He angled her, careful as a prayer, so if she coughed blood, it would leave her mouth and not her lungs. He tucked a folded napkin sleek, expensive between her teeth to keep her from biting her tongue if seizure knocked at the door. The room offered supplies if you knew how to see them as supplies. He unfastened his belt, ran it under her hips, cinched gently into a makeshift pelvic binder. Not tight enough to crush, enough to compress. He slid a folded blazer beneath her knees to reduce strain, saw how her breathing eased by a fraction. For pressure on the scalp, he used his own hand, steady and firm. He checked time without a watch. It was a gut clock. Minutes are longer when they ask you questions. He spoke to her again. Your daughter is safe. Emma's downstairs. She got help. She's very brave. The pulse under his fingertips felt slightly stronger. Not likely. Probably his own heartbeat echoing through concentration. But he let the idea sit because it kept his voice steady. Footsteps at the door. NYPD. A voice announced. Then saw the scene and lowered itself to something useful. 2 officers. One Morales kept her hand near her weapon, only out of habit. The other Keenan took in the blood and the posture of the man working and set his jaw. EMTs are 2 minutes out, Morales said, eyes flicking to Ethan's hands, his improvised binder, his angle of approach. You a medic? Not today, Ethan said. She's got head trauma, probable rib fractures, possible internal bleeding. Scalp wounds messy but manageable. Keep her still. Keep her warm. He shrugged out of the sweatshirt he'd been wearing under his jacket and draped it across Madison's torso. Room's too cold. Keenan's radio crackled. Copy that, he said into the static. We're on 30. Executive floor. One female. Late 30s. Heavy bleeding. Responsive to pain. He looked at Ethan. Name? Madison Brighton. Keenan's eyebrows went north. The name was a newspaper headline all by itself. Of course it is. Morales crouched. You sure you're not a medic? A long time ago. He didn't look up. Can you clear the hall and keep whoever did this from coming back for a second try? And I need a first aid kit. Your car. Now. Morales stood so fast her knee popped. On it. She returned in less than a minute with a kit that had seen better days. Ethan popped it open, eyes scanning the inventory like a chef memorizing his pantry. Gauze. Saline. A small OPA. He left the airway adjunct alone. Didn't need to risk gagging her. He irrigated the scalp wound enough to see its edges. Then packed it. Wrapped it snugly. He taped gauze along her rib cage to cue shallow breaths without binding too tightly. He slid a gloved finger along the line of her jaw, ginger as if the bone might feel insulted. She's going to make it, Morales said, and made it sound like a promise. She's got a real shot, Ethan corrected, and made that sound like the truth. The EMTs arrived with a wave of competence that smelled like latex and antiseptic. They took in the scene, clocked the binder, the positioning, the bandaging, and didn't waste time undoing what had been done well. What's your name? The lead medic asked as they slid a monitor lead along Madison's chest. Ethan. You want a job, Ethan? The medic didn't smile when he said it. It wasn't a joke. It was the acknowledgement of a language. Already have one, Ethan said, and stood to give them room. His knees complained. He ignored them. He backed up, held the 4 bag while the medic spiked it, squeezed a line to prime. BP's low sats are dropping, the second medic called. Let's move. The gurney lifted, became a ship on wheels. Morales held the door. Keenan radioed ahead. Somewhere in the building, people began to finally notice something had happened. Their eyes chased the gurney like it was a comet. As they reached the elevator bank, Ethan paused. The medic stepped in front of him, blocking the doors with one arm. Ride with us, she said. He shook his head. You've got her. You did good work up there, she said, softer now. He didn't answer. He watched the doors close, the reflection of his face briefly trapped on the stainless steel, and then disappearing into his own ghost. He washed Madison's blood from his hands in a utility sink that was older than the building. He scrubbed until the water ran pink to clear. Then kept scrubbing. The noise in his head had risen with the elevator. It had not descended with it. The old songs were playing again. He dried his hands on a stack of brown paper towels and stood with them crushed in his palms like receipts. Walt found him leaning against the cinder block wall, eyes closed as if listening for a train. They took her, Walt said. Presbyterian. EMTs said stabilized. He coughed. Emma's downstairs, asking for you. For you, not for her mother. Not for the police. Not for the constellation of adults orbiting money. For you. He nodded and followed Walt through the service hallway into the bright, curated lobby. The world had reset itself into orderly panic. A cluster of men in suits gestured with important fingers. The receptionist cried quietly into a tissue. Sierra held Emma on a couch near the ficus and rocked forward and back without moving. Emma saw him and slid off Sierra's lap. She didn't run running, felt like the thing that had broken the world. She walked, her little red stars scuffed now with something darker, and stopped a foot from him. Her eyes were wide but holding. "Is she going to die?" she asked, because children, unlike adults, do not put bows on bombs. "Not if she has anything to say about it," Ethan said. "And she has a lot to say." Emma nodded as if taking notes. She reached for his hand and squeezed once. "Thank you," she said, not loudly, not performatively. "I knew you would know what to do." Sierra stood. "We should take her home," she said, voice thin. "Miss Brighton's sister will meet us there." Ethan crouched. "You did everything right," he told Emma. "You got out. You got help. You were brave." Emma's mouth wobbled. "I didn't feel brave. Brave is usually scared first," he said. She surprised him by stepping forward and hugging him. Her arms were small but fierce. He patted her back once, not trusting himself to do more. And when she let go, he had to look away for a second to make sure his face stayed the one other people could see. Sierra led Emma toward the revolving doors. The building took a breath. Keenan approached, pad in hand. Morales at his shoulder. "Mr. Cole," Keenan said, "we need a statement." "Of what I found?" Ethan asked. "And who you are?" Morales added, not unkindly. "A janitor," he said. "Funny kind," Keenan muttered. Ethan rubbed the ghost of a scar near his wrist, half hidden by a freckle and a memory. "I was Army," he said finally. 18 Delta. He watched the recognition flick across Morales's face, like lightning behind glass. "Special Forces Medical Sergeant. The people you send to fix the broken parts in places that don't have language for broken." "How long?" Keenan asked. "Enough," Ethan said. "You got training," Morales said. "Had," he corrected. The difference mattered. "I don't do that anymore." "You did today." Ethan considered arguing and let it pass. "I'll write down what I saw. But after that, I need to go." "Go where?" Keenan asked. But it wasn't the question he thought it was. "Work," Ethan said, and lifted the mop he had abandoned. It dripped a clean line on marble as if to prove he was telling the truth. Madison Brighton, in her hospital room with its gentle machines, became a story told by voices around her. Her sister, Nina, arrived looking like a mirror somebody had smudged, similar bones. Softer edges, fury curled tight in her nails. The surgeons used words like subdural and splenic concern. And we were able to. They were careful with their optimism, the way people are careful with expensive china. Madison herself floated in the quiet sea where morphine and pain take turns holding the oars. NYPD did not float. They moved. The broken security panel yielded fingerprints not registered to any employee. The elevator cameras caught 2 men in contractor uniforms exiting the executive floor earlier than normal, their hats pulled low. They wore the blankness of professionals who rented their faces by the hour. The security log said, "Routine maintenance." The contractor company insisted they had no crews on site that day. Someone had copied the shirts, the logo, the gate. "Inside information," Morales said to Keenan over lukewarm coffee in the precinct's break room. "They knew when she'd be alone. Or someone wanted it to look like that," Keenan said. "Rival firms, jilted board members, she's a CEO. There's a bouquet of people who might want to see her fall. Beating isn't business theater," Morales said. "It's a message." She skimmed the report again. "And our janitor?" "Ethan Cole, DD, 214, confirms an honorable discharge, multiple deployments, medical sergeant, files clean, too clean." "You think he's involved?" "I think he's the first person who did what we're supposed to do when someone is dying," Keenan said, "which makes him rare." "Don't go soft on me, Keenan." "I won't," he said, and meant it. But he also found himself wanting to shake Ethan's hand the way you shake a distance just to feel if it's real. At Brighton Enterprises, the board convened in an emergency meeting that sounded like a window shattering in slow motion. Words like stability, optics, and interim leadership did tricks in the air. The CFO, a narrow man named Richard Ames who wore his hair like a statement of restraint, recommended a communication strategy that dried the blood out of the event and left behind palatable stains. "Do we know who did this?" a board member asked. "Not yet," Richard said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "But we will." He did not say the part about competition. About the deal Madison had been about to close. About the American subsidiary of a conglomerate that disliked losing. He did not say that the message of violence is often received by people who weren't supposed to read it. It wasn't the board who kept asking for Ethan. It was Emma. She asked her aunt where the man with the mop was. She asked the nurse. She asked the ceiling in the hospital room at night, when the machines made language out of electricity. Ethan did not ask for anyone. He went home to the basement apartment he rented from a woman who collected porcelain cats with cracked ears. He fed the goldfish he had, for reasons he didn't interrogate, named Honey. He performed the small rituals that keep people inside their life: laundry, dishes, the quiet satisfaction of a swept floor. He turned on the TV and let the sound move across him like rain without getting wet. The news found him anyway. "Unknown janitor saves CEO," the Chiron said, the words landing like pebbles thrown against his window. A photo of him grainy, from the lobby camera wearing his quiet-like armor. They did not know his name, but they knew enough to ask questions that would eventually find it. He turned off the TV. He sat in the dark and watched his breath move the curtain. He told himself a story he had practiced. "I am no one. I am done. I am a man whose life is small on purpose." He repeated it until the part of him that knew when a lie was being gently folded into a truth grew tired and fell asleep. They found him on a Wednesday in the late afternoon, when the sky over Queens had decided to practice being a bruise. He was stocking trauma shears in a plastic bin at the back of the community clinic, where he spent his off hours doing things that were not on his job description. The clinic was tucked between a bodega and a nail salon, and had the resilient smell of bleach and effort. "Mr. Cole." The voice was a woman's, bright and brittle. He turned. Madison Brighton was in the doorway, not dressed like a person who should be out of bed. A thin knit cap pulled over hair he realized she had lost in surgery. Her left hand rested lightly on a cane, like a bird not sure which branch to trust. Behind her stood Nina, radiating the fierce exhaustion of someone who has been holding a world together with dental floss. Emma squeezed between them in a pink jacket zipped up to her chin. "You're not supposed to be out," he said before he could stop himself. "Tell that to her," Nina muttered, tilting her head at Madison. Madison's mouth found its way to a smile. "I discharged myself," she said, which turns out to be a wonderful phrase if you enjoy making professionals frown. He stared at her, at the gauze that peeked from under the knit cap, at the fading bruises that had bloomed along her cheekbone and now were retreating in greenish waves. He felt the extraordinary, ordinary relief of seeing someone alive. "You saved my life," Madison said. "Not dramatic, not a performance. A statement of record." "You're welcome," he said, because the alternative questions were louder and messier. Emma couldn't help herself. She launched at him. He caught her against his hip, and she wrapped her arms around his neck with the conviction of a person who had decided on a hero and was not open to revisions. "I drew you something," she said, rummaging in her jacket pocket. She produced a folded sheet of printer paper. He unfolded it. A stick figure wearing a janitor's cap stood with a shining medal on his chest, a mop in one hand and a star in the other. Beside him, a stick-figure little girl with yellow boots smiled a wide rectangle. The title in block letters announced, "A Hero with a Mop." "It's accurate," he said solemnly. "We wanted to thank you," Madison said, Privately, first. She took a step inside, her cane tapping a polite rhythm on the linoleum. Then, publicly, if you'll allow it. No, Ethan said. It came out too fast. I mean publicly. No. Thank you isn't necessary, Nina huffed. It is necessary. And you can't tell someone thank you isn't necessary. That makes the thank you rude. I accept your politeness, he said, with a flicker of humor he hadn't expected to find. But really, I just did what I knew how to do. Plenty of people know how to look away, Madison said. You didn't. He had no answer for that. He shrugged, a small tug of one shoulder. The universal sign for a person who would rather stand under a shower than in applause. We also wanted to offer you a job, Madison said. Head of security at Brighton Enterprises. Nina cleared her throat. Interim, until you realize you like money and health insurance and not cleaning other people's coffee. Ethan looked down at Emma's drawing. The metal had been colored yellow, bleeding crayon outside the line. He looked back up. I already have a mission. Saving lives quietly? Madison asked. He blinked. The phrase had found him, boomeranged back. Something like that. Madison's hand tightened on the cane. Then take our gratitude and a different offer. We'll fund the clinic. Equipment. Supplies. Staff. You tell us what you need. Nina's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. We will, Madison said without looking at her. She looked at Ethan instead, held his gaze the way people hold hands in the dark. I have a lot of power in rooms where people pretend it's air. I would like to spend some of it where the air is real. He swallowed. That's not why I know, she said. That's why it feels right. Emma tugged his sleeve. Will you still be in the building sometimes? I want to show you where I hid. It was behind the chair. It's not a very good hiding place, but it was small, and I am small. His throat worked around a laugh. I can visit, he said, but you should pick a different spot next time. Okay, she said. Then considered. What is the best hiding place? In a crowd of people who love you, he said. Nina actually smiled at that. A quick flash of white teeth, like a lighthouse. Okay, she said. I like him. We like him, Emma corrected. Madison offered her hand. He took it. Her grip was firmer than he expected. Her palm was warm. Friends, she said. Friends, he echoed, and found that the word was a rope he could hold even when the ground tilted. The article hit the following Sunday. The headline was better than he feared and worse than he liked. The Quiet Hero. How a janitor saved a CO and changed a company. The photo was mercifully new. He was outside the clinic, sleeves rolled up, not looking at the camera. The piece did its homework. It did not list his deployments, did not tally the dead in a way that would cheapen them. It mentioned his silver star, which he did not remember agreeing to, and quoted a sergeant who had once told him, Cole doesn't like being the center of anything, which is probably why he's good at keeping hearts beating. Brighton Enterprises didn't just fund the clinic. They built a second one in the Bronx, then a mobile unit that could find the men who slept under the highway overpass and the women who avoided hospitals because hospitals had once avoided them. Madison started showing up to ribbon cuttings without the ribbon, a cap pulled low, telling staff, "This is my favorite meeting." The police found the men who had worn contractor uniforms into the 30th floor. Their pathway was predictable. Burner phones, a van, a motel with a weekly rate, and a manager who wanted a new ice machine more than he wanted to answer questions. The money traced itself back to an intermediary who owed a favor to a favor. It was not enough to put a conglomerate's name in ink on a charge sheet, but it was enough to make a boardroom very still. Richard Ames resigned. The press release used the word opportunity 8 times. Ethan went back to work. He also worked more at the clinic. He did not have to choose between the parts of himself that wanted to be useful in the edges of things and the part that understood he would always be most alive when someone said, "We need hands," and he had hands. He did not move apartments. Honey the goldfish lived to a statistically improbable old age. Walt started calling him Doc when no one else was around, then forgot to stop doing it when people were. Sierra enrolled in an EMT course at night, and on the day she passed her first practical, she cried all the way from Queens to Midtown on the F train and texted him a picture of her certificate that said simply, "Your fault." Emma visited the clinic every month with a new drawing. Heroes with different tools. A stethoscope, a tourniquet, a sandwich for a man on a bench. She insisted on stocking gauze. She insisted harder on stealing all the lollipops. Madison healed. The scar at her hairline was a thin white line that sometimes blushed in the cold. When she returned to the office, she had changed the room. The door stayed unlocked during the day. The glass had been replaced and etched with a field of quiet stars. She kept the knit cap for days. She felt like remembering fear and wanted a physical thing to remind her she had lived through it. One afternoon in late spring, after a meeting that had involved 2 senators and 1 disappointed hedge fund, she rode the service elevator to the lobby because she missed the way the building sounded when it wasn't performing. She found Ethan by the plant wall, arguing with a stubborn scuff mark that had decided to become permanent. "You missed a spot," she said. "I'd accuse you of micromanagement," he said, "but you sign my clinic's checks." She tilted her head, a question that didn't need words. "Do you ever regret stepping in the way your life got larger when you'd been keeping it small?" He considered. "Do you ever regret screaming into the pillow instead of at the men who kept saying synergy?" She laughed, quick. "Every day." He leaned on the mop. "I don't regret not leaving you on the floor. I used to think I could only be one thing at a time. It turns out you can be 2. Or 10, she said. "Don't get ambitious," he said mildly, and they stood there for a moment, 2 people who had survived being broken by remembering that someone had to pick up the pieces. Emma burst out of the elevator with the kinetic energy of a small person who has located a bigger person she likes. "Uncle Ethan," she announced. This had happened gradually, then all at once. "We are having tacos. You are invited. Mom says so." "Does Mom say so?" he asked. Madison nodded. "Mom says so. Then I suppose I'm coming," he said. "But only if there are stars on the tacos." "Ridiculous," Emma said, wise beyond her years. "Stars are for boots." "Right," he said. And the lobby's air felt like a day you could carry in your pocket. They walked out together into weather that had finally remembered the script for spring. On the glass above them, the etching caught the sun and scattered it like confetti. No one would have to sweep. People made room in the revolving door without knowing why. The way you instinctively step aside for a stretcher. Or for a child who believes the world will move if she keeps moving. Some heroes don't wear suits or uniforms. Some just hold a mop until destiny calls, and they remember the other thing their hands were made to do. And then, if they are fortunate, they learn they don't have to put the mop down forever to pick up the life they thought they owed to ghosts. The city went on counting money and rain. The clinic light stayed on a little later than the sign said it would. In a lobby that liked to pretend weather wasn't real, a janitor and a CEO's little girl stood under a field of etched stars and argued, cheerfully, about the correct number of tacos. And somewhere on the 30th floor, in a room with glass that knew how to hold, a woman touched the ridge of her scar and decided to spend the rest of her brand new days like currency you can't take with you. All in, all the time, on people who believe a mop can be a medal if you're holding it for the right reason.